do you think that the policy that Donald Trump ran on was better than the policy that Kamala Harris ran on?
No, no, God, no.
Okay, so you voted for the candidate with a worse policy?
Yeah, for the better long-term outcome.
Okay, what's the better
28.
long-term outcome?
That would be what's kind of happening right now is there's a building broad resistance to Donald Trump that will account for probably a blue wave in the midterms and then a resounding defeat the next time around.
You're
so that
absolutely
you can
right.
add Puerto Rico, you can add DC, and you can do
Winston,
all these sort of things the Democrats have been trying to do that they could not do with Kamala Harris because she wouldn't have the Senate.
All right, Winston, why do you support the worst president of your lifetime, Donald J. Trump?
Well, I voted for him at least.
Okay. All right. Well, why do you support him?
Well, I think given the options, it's probably going to end up better going through 4 years of Trump than it would have been from 4 years of Kamala Harris.
All right. Why do you think that?
Well, because I think if Kamala would have won, she was also not on the road to win the Senate either, or at least the Democrats were not. So she would be pretty likely to be ineffective as a leader, and you have this very sort of ineffective government for 2 years, 4 years. That's going to unlock a lot of right-wing rage that would either bring back Donald Trump or something even worse, in something that could be more of a landslide than what happened last time.
Yeah, great. So first and foremost, well, she wasn't on track to win the Senate or the House because she wasn't on track to win the presidency. Democrats were unpopular in the last election. So, I mean, assuming that Democrats were popular, she was more popular than Trump and she won the election, I think that would also mean that Democrats would be on track to win the House and the Senate. Now, I'll also have it be known that I think that the Biden-Harris administration was one of the most effective administrations in modern U.S. history insofar as the domestic policy they passed. And they did so in their first 2 years with, a minority in Congress. So, I think if she would have won the presidency, she would have won Congress. And even if they didn't win Congress, well, the Biden-Harris administration showed that it was still possible to pass a lot of good policy.
I think your math is wrong there on the Senate because there were 2 seats that were up for grabs. One was in West Virginia and one was in Wyoming. And for both of those, the margin of victory was well over what you could imagine for, a big wave of Democratic voters across the country.
Okay, well, I think that any conversation that we'd have about those 2 seats is purely speculative. But once again, we could speculate that if she had the popularity to gain momentum and win the White House, it's likely that Democrats could have also won those 2 seats in the Senate. But even if they did not, under the Biden-Harris administration, they demonstrated in their first 2 years with a minority in Congress that a good policy could still be passed. So now that we can understand that, do you think that the policy that Donald Trump ran on was better than the policy that Kamala Harris ran on?
No, God, no.
Okay, so you voted for the candidate with a worse policy?
Yeah, for the better long-term outcome.
Okay, what's the better long-term outcome?
That would be what's kind of happening right now is there's a building broad resistance to Donald Trump that will account for probably a blue wave in the midterms and then a resounding defeat the next time around.
You're
so that
absolutely
you can
right.
add Puerto Rico, you can add DC, and you can do all these sort of things the Democrats have been trying to do that they could not do with Kamala Harris because she wouldn't have the Senate.
So about your first claim that right now we're on track to just absolutely destroy the midterms in 2028, I'd agree with you. I think that Democrats will see massive victories in 2026 and 2028. And I think that we saw this as a microcosm in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, right? But the thing here is, the reason why there's so much resistance against the Trump administration is because of all of the harm they've been causing. So they've deported people without due process and stuck innocent men in a prison in El Salvador. And then when the Supreme Court told them that they got to get them out, they refused. He has a plan to personally ethnically cleanse 2.1 million Palestinians off the Gaza Strip. And he has economic policy that wants to redistribute wealth from the poor to the rich. And he launched an attack on women's rights by overturning Roe v. Wade and doing nothing about it now, which means that there's 66 million human rights violations in our country today, with 60 great victims being denied access to abortion every single day. And those are just a few of the many reasons why there's so much resistance, right? But I don't think it's super okay for you to say, well, I see all of the women that will be affected by the Trump administration. I see all of the immigrants that will be affected by the Trump administration. I see all of the Palestinians that will be affected by the Trump administration. I see all the low and middle class Americans that will be affected by the Trump administration as mere damage that has to occur in order for us to build a revolution. I think that that's a very sick way of thinking. I think it's a very privileged way of thinking. And I think that if you existed in any of these communities that Donald Trump is impeding harm on every single day of his term, you'd think very differently, and you definitely hold a lot of resentment towards people like yourself right now.
So you're saying to not vote strategically?
Well, I'm saying I don't think it's a good strategy to advocate for harm towards millions to build a resistance.
It's not to build a resistance. It's for the opportunity within the following 8 years to have any progressive policies passed.
So do you just view all the people being harmed by the Trump administration today as mere collateral damage?
I think every political move has its consequences.
So like, I just want you to say it very explicitly. The 60 great victims that are being denied abortion every single day because Kamala Harris was not elected and Donald Trump wants to keep the right to get an abortion at the state level, I want you to call them collateral damage.
Well, I don't think that that's an appropriate way of describing what these horrible things are. I think one voting strategy results in more harm of this type than others in the short term, but maybe not in the long term.
Okay. All right. Well, you said that was an inappropriate way of defining collateral damage. Or applying the term of collateral damage. I think that it would be an appropriate way, given what you're saying is true, because you're basically saying that you want Donald Trump to do a lot of bad things for a resistance to be built in our country so we could get more progressive policies passed in the future, right?
No, I wouldn't say that I'd want Donald Trump to do more bad things.
So if you didn't want Donald Trump to do,
it's inevitable for him to do bad things.
If you didn't want Donald Trump to do more bad things, then you wouldn't have voted for him. Or you'd be defending that he was a better candidate. I mean, like, I think those are the only two, like, logically expressible options. If you don't want Donald Trump to do bad things, either you think he will do good things, or you don't vote for him.
That's a pretty simplistic way of describing.
What are the other options? I mean, come on. I want you to go ahead and explain to me and the other, 7,000 people listening, how you could vote for Donald Trump, acknowledge that his policy is bad, will cause harm to many, while saying that you don't want him to do these bad things.
I was saying it's not inevitable. It's inevitable that he would do these bad things, whether I have a preference for them or not.
Well, it's actually not inevitable, given that he didn't win the election. Okay, and given the idea that it is not inevitable that these bad things will occur, that he lost the election, you would obviously want him to lose the election, right?
Unless the counterfactual.
I just want a yes or no. Do you?
No.
Did you want
really depends
Donald
on the
Trump,
counterfactual?
The
because
counterfactual
you can't
was
give a
Kamala
yes
Harris.
or no.
So I want to clarify.
Right, exactly.
Do you wish that Donald Trump lost the election in 2024?
Do I wish that he lost the election?
Yes.
I don't think we have enough information to decide whether that is would be a good thing to wish for or not.
I think that we do. I think that, in a very simplistic sense, I wish that Donald Trump lost the election in 2024 because Kamala Harris's policy wouldn't have intentionally crashed the stock market and sent America barreling towards a recession. Her policy wouldn't be leaving 60 great victims per day hanging without access to needed health care. Her policy, although it was pro-Israel, was not as bad for Palestinians as Donald Trump. So there's a significant larger amount of Palestinians that are now harmed that wouldn't have been harmed otherwise. Not to mention our global relations, the imminence of a third world war by Europe getting more involved with boots on the ground in Ukraine fighting Russia. I think that there is a billion ways to evaluate that question that definitely lead to the conclusion that we should all wish Donald Trump lost the election.
I think that's short-sighted. I think there's much more that can play out on the scale of decades that this decision is a linchpin of. And 2 years in, we barely have, not even 2 years in, we barely have the ability to look back on this and judge Like, say, in 1939, are you judging what's happening in 1936? I mean,
Okay, so if you think that we just seriously lack enough information to say that Kamala Harris was the better candidate, well, then how did you have enough information to justifiably vote for Trump?
oh, because historically, what happens is if you have a candidate who does not have the Senate under their control, typically that candidate will be firmly defeated in the following election. And I think to have any major chance to break,
So I've already described
more
to
than
you
just bipartisan
saying that Kamala
work.
Harris, if she were to have won the election, would have lost the Senate. That's merely speculative, and we'd have good reason to believe otherwise. Plus the idea that Biden and Harris had a minority in Congress in their first 2 years, and they were able to effectively pass a lot of policy.
I think you should probably look up the numbers from West Virginia and tell me how you think that this particular race could have changed.
I mean,
Like,
you're looking at numbers from an
statistically.
election after a country had experienced 4 years of economic turmoils that led to the RNC spending billions of dollars to convince them that it was to blame on the Democrats. Of course, we're going to see a far right shift in many seats across our country. But if we're operating under this hypothetical worldview where Kamala Harris won the election, she had swiped the swing states, well, I think it's mere speculation for you to say that she would have lost the Senate. And then once again, I will say it for the very last time, Biden and Harris had a minority in Congress during their first 2 years in office and passed a lot of very effective policy because they were able to work with the other side of the aisle. But also,
Yeah,
I just want to make it known after another 4 years of like Trump, it's possible that we won't even have elections. Like, I don't understand why you just don't give a shit about the fact that we're in a constitutional crisis right now. This guy is our president, who in 2020 already tried to rig the outcome of a presidential election. This guy who today is ignoring orders from the Supreme Court. They made a unanimous decision that he had to get the innocent resident from Maryland home to America from the prison in El Salvador. He said he didn't have the authority to do that. And then earlier this morning, he was caught on a hot mic telling the leader of El Salvador that he might want to build more prisons there to house American citizen inmates in El Salvador to deport our own citizens. This is the same guy that has called the media illegal and is now directing public officials with the use of his administration to come down hard on news organizations for reporting things that he doesn't like. I mean, it's the same guy that in December of 2022 straight up called for a termination of the American Constitution. I think it's funny that you seem to be so hyperfixated on 2 Senate seats when we have the potential destruction of our country in the rearview mirror, man.
Yeah, Trump has been doing some pretty bad stuff. It's pretty dramatic, and I think it is really setting up the stage for like a once in a lifetime sort of opportunity, which is a historically unpopular president.
I agree. I think by the end of
We
Donald
wouldn't have
Trump's
this
4 years,
opportunity if Kamala Harris was in office.
that is true. That is true. That is what you're saying right now is true. By the end of Donald Trump's term, I agree with you. The idea that he will be an historically unpopular candidate is definitely there. Okay, the idea that Democrats are gonna absolutely dominate in the midterms and in the next presidential election is absolutely there. I said this at the beginning of our conversation. We've already seen this in microcosms across the country with the Wisconsin Supreme Court race and the 2 special elections in Florida. Holy shit, Dem swung like plus 17 points. That is ahistorical. That's insane. That's crazy. The movements on the left are emboldened and stronger than I think they ever have been in modern American history, and I think that's great. Okay, but the thing is that all these great things only exist because of bad actions from our government. Okay, and those bad actions from our government have caused all these great things to exist because of the really vitriol, real material harm they have impeded upon American citizens and non-American citizens alike. And ultimately speaking, that is a bad thing, full stop. It should not have happened, even if it was at the sake of these great liberal movements that we see in America today. Think about it this way, man. Let's imagine a woman. All right. This woman was unfortunately raped as a child, but then she spent the rest of her life advocating for rape victims and advocating for the end of rape culture. Okay? And by the time she's 55, she is able to successfully be guiding a movement of millions of American citizens to fight against rape culture, to fight against harm against victims, to fight against harm against women, and she's able to successfully lead this awesome, awesome, awesome movement. Does this justify the fact that she was raped as a kid? Does this mean that she should have been raped as a kid?
That's a very complicated story. Can we at least look at the counterfactual that you presented?
I want you to respond to my question.
The story is, does something from the past justify something in the future?
A woman is raped as a child, and then it leads her on to one of the most successful lives of advocacy to end rape culture in America. Does this mean she should have been raped as a child?
I'm not passing judgment on should or should not in terms of the past.
I am asking you to,
It's a historical event.
Should this event have occurred?
Should this event have occurred? I mean, every event happens for a reason.
So if you say it happened for a reason, you're saying that this child should have got raped.
Well, I'm saying there's no other potential way for it to have gone, given that reality is deterministic.
I'm saying that it was possible that she wasn't raped. Should this child have been raped, yes or no, Winston?
That would be preferable. Yeah, sure, of course.
Okay, so she shouldn't have been raped, even though, because she was raped, it led her to a life of advocacy to end rape culture in America, which was good, right? So we're going to go ahead and apply this logic to the Trump administration.
Well, I would say not everyone would agree, right?
We're going to go ahead and apply this logic to the Trump administration. Although the Trump administration has led to the second-order consequence of left-leaning movements across our country, and quite possibly one of the hardest dominations of Democrats in the midterms and in 2028, this doesn't mean that he should have won the election. In fact, he should have lost the election because of the real material harm that his policy and administration has caused, even though it's led to the second-order consequence of liberal movements being more emboldened than they ever have been in modern American history.
You're implying a universal moral should here. I think different people can have different value systems that apply differently to the results.
If different people didn't have different value systems, I wouldn't be debating you, Winston. The whole point of us having a conversation is because we have different value systems. This is not responding or addressing what I've said in the slightest. Do you need me to repeat my argument to demonstrate how your logic implies that Donald Trump should have lost the election? Or are you going to continue to be incredibly dense and unwilling to have a conversation with somebody that disagrees with you? Because right now, this is crazy. I feel as if I'm making the most simple argument ever, and it's just going completely unheard. I feel like there's many. One moment. I feel like
there's no moral universal should.
There's
not.
So you're saying that morality doesn't exist?
I'm saying that there's no universal moral should.
I don't even know what you mean by universal moral should. I don't even know what that means. What do you mean?
Okay, when you say this event happened in the past and it should not have, that's what I mean by should.
I'm also not. Wait, so you can't say that things in the past shouldn't have happened?
Of course not.
So the Holocaust shouldn't have happened. You can't say that.
Of course not. Nothing in the past there's no moral judgment we can make in terms of should or should not on things that have happened in the past because it's historical reality.
So I like it to be known that the word should in a moral sense just means good. The word shouldn't in a moral sense just means bad. So if you're saying that we cannot use these moral shoulds and shouldn'ts as it relates to events that have already occurred, all that this means is that you don't think I could say the Holocaust is bad. All this means is that you don't think I could say that American slavery was wrong.
I'm saying you don't have enough information right now to know whether the long-term effect of Donald Trump.
No, I don't want you to pivot away from what I just said.
Counterfactual.
So can you just please affirm the fact
Kamala
that the outcome?
Harris.
I just want you to affirm the fact that the outcome of the statement you just shared with us is that I cannot say that that American slavery was a bad thing.
You can't say it should not have happened.
Well, the word bad just means should not have occurred.
No, that's not the case.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Unironically, yes, it is. Sorry, sir. I was a philosophy major with an emphasis on ethics. I'm quite understanding of normative ethics as it relates to these more philosophical conversations. So when we use the terms good or bad, the word good only relates the statement should occur. The word bad only relates the statement shouldn't have occurred in this moral normative sense. Like unironically, if you don't think that these words are equivocal, please give a good thing that shouldn't happen or a bad thing that should happen. You won't be able to give an example of a bad thing that should happen or a good thing that shouldn't happen because the word good means should happen and the word bad means shouldn't happen.
I'm saying anything in the past, you can't apply that framework because there's no changing it.
So now that we've understood that good does mean should and bad does mean shouldn't, just clarifying, you think that I can't say that American slavery was bad because all that I mean.
I never said you can't say that American slavery is bad. I said
all that I mean when I
say
say
this
Sir,
thing
Winston,
in the past should or should not have happened.
Winston, when I'm saying that American slavery was bad, I'm saying that American slavery shouldn't have happened. What do you mean when you say it's bad? Because if you don't mean that it shouldn't have happened.
I'm not making any moral judgments on the past. You're the one who's doing so.
Winston, I'm asking you to make a moral judgment. Do you think that American slavery was bad?
In which cultural framework which morals do you wish me to apply to this question?
Morals.
My morals. Then yes.
Okay. So when you say that you think American slavery was bad, are you simply reiterating the sentiment that American slavery shouldn't have occurred?
No, it's a personal opinion that I'm expressing.
Okay. So then if you don't mean that American slavery shouldn't have occurred, what do you mean?
I mean that American slavery is something that's generally regarded as bad and had done some pretty negative things.
Define bad.
Throughout history.
Define bad. If you don't mean shouldn't have occurred, I don't know what you mean by bad. Define bad. Define bad.
Well, you're saying in my moral framework.
Yeah, under your moral framework, what is moral wrongness? What does that mean? Define it.
This is me just trying to approximate my point of view to.
I answer my question. What is moral? What does it mean for something to be morally wrong?
What does it mean for some? That means that within certain particular moral framework, a choice or action that an actor takes is deemed to be counter to what's deemed good within that moral framework.
Okay, so you're just saying that badness is counter to good. So the definition of badness is counter to good. So then what's good? Define moral goodness. Are you just going to say counter to badness? Because at that point,
no,
you're giving no real definition of what these words mean.
It's whatever the moral framework says it is.
So what does your moral framework define moral goodness as? Like, what do you mean by the word good?
I don't really have a very concrete term for description for what I mean.
Okay, so then you just have a lack of so you have now basically said that you have a complete and total lack of an ability to tell me what goodness and badness means. The reason why you tell one moment, Winston, the reason why you have a complete and total lack of an ability to tell me what good and badness means is because good and badness means should occur or should not occur. Okay? And you've rejected those definitions. So now you don't know how the fuck to even define these terms because that's the only way you can define these terms.